previous lesson, we have seen the role of energy efficiency in pursuing the Sustainable Development Goal 7 and reducing greenhouse gases and polluting emissions. In this lesson, we will analyze the role of renewable energy by going through and discussing the current outlook and the global opportunities for the renewable energy market. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the most important challenges concerning renewable energy for power and heat production and transport. You will be able also to identify the main technological and market opportunities concerning the use of renewables for improving access to energy in developing countries. Today, according to the data provided by the International Energy Agency, the share of renewables in both the global total primary energy demand and the total final consumption is around 10%. By considering the existing and announced policies, this share is forecast to increase up to 14% by 2040. In order to achieve the objectives of the UN SDGs related to energy, the IEA developed the so-called Sustainable Development Scenario and estimated that the share of total primary energy demand and total final consumption should grow up to 30%. To achieve this goal, electricity generation, heat production and transports are the three principal targeted sectors for increasing the penetration of renewables. In the power sector, the share of renewable in total electricity generation has grown very rapidly in the last years, reaching the current global share equal to 25%. The main contributions come from hydropower, wind and solar photovoltaics, which in 2017 represented the 65, 17 and 7% of the total share of renewables, respectively. Especially for wind and solar, the increase in their penetration has been driven by policy support and declining costs, which caused their capacity additions to outpace those of fossil fuels in 2017. 97 GW of solar PV, of which 53 only in China, and 43 GW of wind. The penetration of renewables is expected to increase in the future years. Based on the existing and announced policies, the electricity generation from renewables is expected to increase by more than double by 2040, reaching a share of 41% in the total power generation. By this time, wind production is expected to more than triple, reaching almost 30% of the total generation, while solar photovoltaics should even increase by a coefficient of 7, reaching 33% of total generation. Based on the different levels of penetrations of renewables in the power sectors, different key challenges arise regarding the integration of renewables into the electricity system. If, on the one hand, minor change to operating patterns are required in the case of very low penetration of renewables, on the other, changes to the technical, market and regulatory and institutional frameworks are needed as the level of variable renewables increases. In this context, the need for flexibility to guarantee the reliability of power systems is crucial. Power plants currently represent the major current source of flexibility, especially thermal plants and hydro, followed by smart electricity interconnections, demand-side response and storage. Concerning the heating sector, renewables are still far from overcoming the use of fossil fuels, which currently cover a share of around 90% of the global heat demand. In the sector, the share of renewables is expected to increase up to 15% in 2040, still far from the required 25% needed for accomplishing the objectives of the UN SDGs related to energy. The transport sector is nowadays responsible for a quarter of energy-related CO2 emissions, 95% due to the emissions from oil. Considering the growing population and the global economy, the energy demand in the transport sector is projected to increase significantly, and appropriate measures for limiting the environmental impact of this sector are needed. Policies promoting energy efficiency in the transport represent the most important lever. Concerning the use of renewables, their total share in the direct energy consumption in the transport sector was almost 3% in 2017, almost entirely given by the use of biofuels, especially ethanol. This share is expected to increase up to almost 9% in 2040, with 2/3 represented by biofuels and 1/3 by renewable-based electricity. The above-mentioned expectations regarding the penetration of renewable energy sources in the global mix represent, of course, an economic opportunity for the private sector and the global community. The Business and Sustainable Development Commission indicates that clean energy is one of the largest business themes for the Sustainable Development Goals. The diffusion and expansions of clean renewable energy resources can represent an opportunity of $165 to $600 billion for energy producers and equipment manufacturers in 2030. Concerning the developing countries, the achievement of sustainable energy for all is one of the targets of the Sustainable Development Goal number 7. In this context, the role of renewable energy increased in the last years. According to the IEA, the proportion of people that received access to electricity with renewables was 28% between 2000 and 2012, while it increased up to 36% between 2012 and 2015, especially thanks to renewables-based programs in sub-Saharan Africa, where hydropower, geothermal, and solar PV accounted for 70% of new electricity access since 2012. In this context, the penetration of renewable energy sources is expected to considerably grow in the next decade. Based on the existing and announced policies, 92% of the global population are expected to achieve access to electricity by 2030. 60% of those who gain access over the period to 2030 does it with renewables, and more than 60% of this share is via decentralized solutions, especially solar photovoltaics. The remaining 40% will be through grid extension, especially hydro. For achieving total electricity access by 2030, the vast majority of the resources for electrifying the remaining 8% of the global population by 2030 are expected to be devoted to the realization of decentralized systems. In fact, 72% of these additional people who will gain electricity access will do it through off-grid solutions and mini-grids, almost entirely powered by solar photovoltaic. The remaining 28% are expected to be provided with electricity through grid extension, which is attributable for around 85% to renewable resources, especially hydro and solar. In conclusion, the decentralized power systems will play an increasing role for addressing the future energy access challenges. This highlights the potential engagement of the private sector through new business models and financial schemes, creative partnerships, technological cooperation, and innovative governance, capacity building and creation of local expertise, which are crucial for making strategic and effective investments in the energy access sector.